They are taking that lunch break there. Great time for us to bring in our analyst standing by. National trial attorney Michael Jaafar is with us, watching along. Michael, you've seen this trial from the very beginning. That was last year. Now we're getting ready for this retrial. And I do want to get your analysis of Dr. Russell, but I also want to go back to that big news we heard about 30 minutes ago about Chloe the dog and the molds that exist of her mouth. But yet this expert said that she doesn't really need them. She was not nearly as interested in them as I am of wanting to know more about Chloe.
Yeah, of course she's not interested in them because she's not an expert, right? She's not an expert in this. If her theory is because I was the emergency room doctor and I saw dog bites, which I agree that people who are bitten by a dog go to the hospital, then why not bring on nurses in the emergency room? They have more relevant experience by her theory than the doctor does because they're the ones who dress the wounds, right? There are experts who can testify to this. You can bring on a canine behaviorist. You can bring on bite pattern experts. You don't need this doctor. This doctor walked into the lawyer's office at the 11th hour, and she basically told him, "I can help you out." She never examined John O'Keefe. She didn't examine the bite patterns. She's not an expert. And now that we know that there is molds of the jaw, which, by the way, shocked me because the people who have the conspiracy theory hoax said, well, they gave up the dog after the trial to cover up for themselves, but now here we go. There's a mold of Chloe's jaw, which in my opinion solves everything. But they've already tested John O'Keefe's arm. There was no canine DNA anyway. And my risk here, Julia, the risk here to me is that this might confuse the jury because juries gravitate towards the inflammatory. With the testimony of this doctor, they might be confused to think that she's testifying as to the cause of John O'Keefe's death, as opposed to what the bite marks are. Because we know that the purpose of the bite marks are a tangential part of the theory of the defense. Nobody's arguing that the bite marks are why John O'Keefe died. What the defense is saying is that bite marks show that he was dragged into the Alpert home, beaten to death, mauled by Chloe, and then dragged back out. And then maybe perhaps Bigfoot killed him at that point, right? That's the theory that, as I understand it. So I think she might confuse the jury with her testimony and the judge is going to be thinking about this, right? Maybe the jury might think that she's testifying as to the cause of death for John O'Keefe, as opposed to what those bite marks signify, because they are, obviously they're important. We all want to know how he got those dog bites, those marks. But he might have gotten those marks because of the fact that he was mauled by an animal, by a scavenger animal after the fact, which is the only likely thing other than, opposed to being dragged into the Alpert home and beaten to death. That's why I think that this decision by Judge Canone is going to be very important.
I think it's important that you reminded us of this larger picture, because after you start talking about SUV versus dog bites, what do these scratches mean? You start thinking, well, the prosecution says the cause of death was the SUV, but the defense isn't saying the cause of death was Chloe. It's a lot bigger than that. There's a lot. We're approaching the top of the hour, so we are going to have to get to a break. Let's bring back in, though, before we go, national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, we know Judge Canone is going to have to make a decision soon, so everyone can prepare on how it's going to be in April. Do you think that this strict scrutiny, almost this really tough cross-examination, and now the attempt to rehabilitate Dr. Russell, is due to the fact that this is a murder trial, and often dog bite cases would end up in civil court?
I completely agree. I think Judge Canone is going to allow it, and I'll tell you why. Politics are going to play into this, right? Judge Canone lives in that community, right? She's an elected member of that community. She lives in that community. This case has become a pressure cooker for her, and she learned from the first trial that she doesn't want to feed in to the conspiracy hoaxes. She disallows this expert, which people believe that she is basically acquitting Karen Read. I think it could be bad. I think she's going to allow it, but she's also going to realize, you know what? Who cares? If I admit this expert, then we know that this lady, she has a lack of recent experience. She has limited experience in canine bite analysis. Her experience is outdated. Most of her work involving dog bites occurred over 3 decades ago, and her prior forensic evaluations pertain to law enforcement canines, which differ from domestic canines. So let me allow this expert, let me give them their pound of flesh, because at the end of the day, the state will bring on an actual canine bite expert to testify, and it will completely discard everything this woman's saying. Let me allow her in, because at the end of the day, the judge, she's an elected member of that community, If she feels like in the interest of justice, she's going to let an expert in, she's going to let it in. So I think she's going to let it in. But at the end of the day, I think this is just a complete distraction, and the state has an answer, and they're waiting, and they will address it.
Key phrase there: in the interest of justice. Karen Read is entitled to a defense. Michael Jaafar, thank you so much for your analysis.